In the quiet hills of Castel Gandolfo, far from the sound of sirens and the thunder of artillery, a meeting took place that, at first glance, might seem merely ceremonial, but in reality it carried the full moral, diplomatic, and spiritual weight of one of the most brutal conflicts of our time. On December 9, 2025, Pope Leo XIV received Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy in private audience at the papal residence. It was their second meeting in just 5 months. And once again, the heart of their conversation was not power, not territory, not sanctions, but suffering, peace, and hope. The Holy See described the encounter as cordial. But behind that word lies something far deeper, a persistent attempt by the Catholic Church to speak into a world that often seems deaf to moral authority. The Pope reiterated the same message that has become the backbone of his pontificate: the urgent need for dialogue, the desperate hope for a just and lasting peace, and the immediate concern for prisoners of war and the return of Ukrainian children to their families. These children, taken from occupied territories, displaced across borders, separated from their parents, have become one of the most painful symbols of this war. And the Vatican, again and again, has chosen to speak for them when political systems hesitate. This moment in Castel Gandolfo did not happen in isolation. It is one chapter in a much longer, deeper story. A story that connects prayer and geopolitics, diplomacy and doctrine, suffering and salvation. To understand December, we must return to May. Only weeks after his election, Pope Leo XIV stood before the world at his inauguration Mass. As nations celebrated, he looked instead at the wounds of humanity. He spoke of Gaza. He spoke of Myanmar. And then he spoke of Ukraine. War-torn, he called it, a nation waiting for negotiations that would lead to a just and lasting peace. That very day, he met Volodymyr Zelenskyy privately inside the Vatican. It was his first face-to-face encounter with the Ukrainian leader, and it lasted about 30 minutes. What was said was not officially disclosed, but what followed told us everything. Zelenskyy publicly thanked the Pope for his appeal for peace. They spoke of prisoners. They spoke of the deported children. They spoke of ceasefire proposals. And they spoke of the Vatican's possible role as a mediator. It was also in May that the geopolitical chessboard revealed its tensions more openly. After Mass, Zelenskyy met with U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance and Secretary of State Marco Rubio, both Catholics. The symbolism was unmistakable, and looming in the background was the complex relationship with U.S. President Donald Trump, marked by public disagreements over ceasefire strategies and negotiations with Russia. In September, Pope Leo sent a deeply spiritual letter to Ukraine, addressed to Cardinal Crescencio Sepe, his envoy to the 650th anniversary of the Metropolitan See of Halich in Lviv. Written in Latin, yet burning with pastoral urgency, the Pope urged Ukrainians to guard charity within families and public life, to nurture Christian hope daily, and to fervently beg God for the gift of peace. This was not the language of strategy. This was the language of the gospel. While world leaders calculate leverage, the Pope speaks of love. While generals count tanks, the Church counts souls. By the time Zelenskyy returned to Castel Gandolfo in December, the situation had only grown more fragile. Just days earlier, he had secured support from Britain, France, Germany, the European Union, and NATO. Europe once again closed ranks around Kiev. But across the Atlantic, tensions were visible. Trump publicly accused Zelenskyy of rejecting U.S. peace proposals. The pressure was mounting, not only from Moscow, but from within the Western alliance itself. After meeting the Pope, Zelensky traveled to Rome to meet Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni. Every movement, every handshake, every statement was weighted with consequence. And yet, in the middle of this strategic storm, the Vatican spoke the same words it has always spoken: dialogue, justice, peace. Not victory, not revenge, not humiliation of the enemy, peace. The Vatican has no army, no oil, no missiles, no sanctions, and yet it holds one form of power few actors possess: moral authority. Pope Leo XIV has repeatedly expressed the Holy See's willingness to host negotiations between Ukraine and Russia. This echoes a centuries-long tradition in which the Church positions itself not as a superpower, but as a bridge. This is not neutrality in the face of evil. It is moral mediation rooted in the dignity of every human person, Ukrainian and Russian alike. The Vatican's insistence on prisoners of war and deported children is deeply Catholic in character. These are not side issues. They are the measure of whether peace is real or merely political theater. Because a peace that forgets prisoners is not peace. A peace that ignores stolen children is not justice. Ukraine continues to insist it is ready for real diplomacy. Russia, for its part, has sent only low-level delegations to previous talks. The battlefield grinds on. Cities bleed slowly. Families wait without timelines. In this deadlock, every diplomatic channel matters, including one of the smallest states in the world, Vatican City. And this is where the Catholic vision becomes radically countercultural. The Church does not measure success by territorial maps. It measures it by human lives restored. This is why Pope Leo speaks not only to presidents, but to parishes, not only to ambassadors, but to families, not only to diplomats, but to children. The war in Ukraine no longer belongs to Eastern Europe alone. It is a fault line that runs through the United States and its internal political divisions, Europe's security architecture, NATO's strategic posture, and the emerging multipolar world order. While Washington debates strategies and Moscow entrenches positions, Europe feels the war geographically, economically, and spiritually. And standing above these shifting alliances is a pope who speaks in a radically different register, not of domination, but of conversion. From a Catholic perspective, this entire diplomatic landscape takes on a deeper dimension. Every meeting between the Pope and Zelensky is more than political. It is sacramental in its logic, an outward sign of an inward spiritual mission. The mission to defend life, heal memory, restore families, protect children, and remind the world that peace is not weakness. In the words of Pope Leo himself, Ukraine must keep the flame of hope alive each day. Hope is not optimism. Hope is not prediction. Hope is defiance against despair. And in a world flooded with despair, that may be the most revolutionary act of all. In Castel Gandolfo, there were no signed treaties, no ceasefire announcements, no dramatic breakthroughs, only a pope, a president, and the stubborn belief that even the most violent wars can still be interrupted by conscience. The world's great powers may shape borders, but history often turns on quieter rooms, softer voices, and prayers spoken behind closed doors. For Catholics, this is not naivete. It is faith lived at the intersection of heaven and earth. And as long as those doors in Castel Gandolfo continue to open, as long as the Church continues to whisper peace into a world that shouts war, the story of Ukraine and the story of humanity is not yet finished.